stretched. He hadn't seen the doll before, not when he had come into the room. His hand tightened around the flashlight, the plastic handle slick with sweat. He told himself it was just a toy, just a trick of the light. But as he stared at it, the doll's head seemed to tilt slightly, as if it was watching him with a curiosity that was anything but innocent. He forced himself to look away, focusing on the TV, the static a comforting white noise. But the doll's presence was a constant itch in the back of his mind. He could feel its gaze on him, a silent accusation that made his skin crawl. With a trembling hand, he reached for the remote and turned the TV off. The sudden darkness was a shock, the only light coming from the moon outside. The doll's eyes gleamed in the gloom, reflecting the moonlight like twin pools of black water. Timmy took a deep breath and turned the flashlight back on, pointing it at the doll. Its smile was still there, unwavering, unchanging. He approached it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. As he got closer, the smell of dust and something else, something faintly sweet and cloying, filled his nose. He reached out, his hand shaking, and touched the doll's cheek. The moment his skin made contact with the cold plastic, the room plunged into darkness. The flashlight flickered and died, leaving him in the cold embrace of the night. He stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The doll was still there, a silent sentinel in the gloom. The house was absolutely still, the kind of quiet that made his ears ring. And then, from somewhere upstairs, he heard it. The sound of something moving, something that didn't belong. A thump, a drag, and then the sound of a door opening slowly, the hinges protesting with a mournful creak. Timmy's blood turned to ice. The doll had moved the moment the light went out, and now the house had come alive with the sounds of something else. He knew he should scream for Granny, but his voice was trapped in his throat, a tiny, muffled cry that wouldn't escape. With trembling hands, he felt around for the TV remote. He found it under the couch cushion, and with a flick of his thumb, the TV sprang back to life. The brightness was a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness that had enveloped him, and he basked in its glow, his eyes glued to the flickering images. He turned the volume up, hoping the noise would drown out the sounds from upstairs. He scanned the channels, looking for something, anything that would keep him awake and distract him from the doll's unwavering gaze. His eyes fell on an infomercial for a knife set that could cut through a shoe. It was ridiculous, but it was better than the static. He lay back down, the couch cushions sticking to his sweaty skin. The TV's blue light cast eerie shadows across the room, but he didn't dare turn it off again. The infomercial's cheery host was a beacon of normalcy in the sea of dread. Timmy forced himself to focus on the knives, the way they sliced through tomatoes and steaks with ease. The sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor upstairs grew louder, but he ignored it, his eyes glued to the screen. He told himself that it was just the house settling, that the doll had moved because of his imagination playing tricks on him. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The TV's volume grew fainter, the images on the screen blurring into a kaleidoscope of color. His eyes grew heavy, the weight of fear and adrenaline finally taking its toll. He knew he needed to stay awake, but his body had other plans. The sounds of the infomercial became a soothing lullaby, the host's voice a gentle hum that lulled him closer to sleep. Timmy's thoughts grew fuzzy, the line between reality and nightmare blurring. The plastic soldiers and the dolls were just toys, the TV just a piece of furniture. The house was just a place, filled with old memories and dusty secrets. But as his eyes fluttered shut, the sound of the man's laugh from the static invaded his mind, echoing through the halls of his subconscious. In his dream, Timmy found himself in the middle of a monochrome nightmare. The living room was now a stage for a twisted play, with the plastic soldiers and the Raggedy Ann doll standing sentinel around him. The TV was a window to a world of chaos, the screen flickering with images of his mother's old room, now a battlefield for the ghosts of his ancestors. Their faces, once filled with love and warmth, now contorted with anger and hunger, reached out to him, their arms elongating like shadowy tentacles. The house's furniture grew menacing, morphing into twisted versions of themselves, their wooden limbs creaking and groaning as they moved. The plastic soldiers marched in unison, their eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. The Barbie dolls had multiplied, their vacant stares now filled with a malicious intent that sent chills down his spine. The room spun around him, the couch disappearing, leaving him in a void with only the cackling laughter of the dolls for company. And then, amidst the cacophony, a voice whispered in his ear, "You're dreaming, Timmy." It was a gentle, soothing voice, one that didn't belong in this hellish playground. He recognized it as his mother's, and with that realization, the fear began to recede. The doll's laughter grew fainter, the soldiers marching more erratic. The walls of the room melted away, and the TV's screen flickered with the words "Wake up." Timmy took a deep breath and the world around him shifted. The dolls and soldiers were still there, but they were just toys again, the room a tapestry of shadows cast by the moonlight. He sat up, the panic receding. He knew he was dreaming, and with that knowledge came a sense of power. The fear didn't vanish entirely, but it no longer had a chokehold on him. Dreams are thoughts, all I do is think it and it happens. I'm in control of my thoughts. He focused his mind, willing the dolls and soldiers to return to their rightful places. To his amazement, they obeyed, retreating to their corners of the room like a tide pulled back by an invisible moon. The TV's volume grew louder, the infomercial's host now a beacon of reality in the sea of his subconscious. With a newfound courage, Timmy turned to the Raggedy Ann doll. It still sat atop the dresser, but its smile was gone, replaced by a neutral expression that seemed almost apologetic. He reached out and took it into his arms, feeling its soft fabric and plastic limbs. It was just a toy, a relic of his mother's childhood. He whispered to it, "I'm not afraid of you." And with that, the doll's eyes closed, and it went limp in his arms. He placed it gently on the couch beside him, the weight of its presence now comforting rather than terrifying. The house was quiet again, the night pressing against the windows like a soft blanket. Timmy knew that he had to stay awake, that he couldn't let the fear take over again. He turned the TV to a channel that played cartoons all night, the familiar laughter and sound effects a comforting white noise. He lay there, the doll at his side, watching the flickering images dance across the screen. His eyes grew heavy, the battle against sleep a losing one. But as he slipped into the embrace of unconsciousness, he knew that he had won a small victory over the darkness. The clock read 6:15 a.m. when Timmy's eyes snapped open again. The cartoons had ended, and the TV was now playing an old black and white movie. Timmy sat up, the couch cushions sticking to his damp clothes. He felt a wetness on his face and realized his nose had bled in his sleep. He reached up to wipe it away, his hand coming away sticky with blood. He looked around the room, his heart racing. The plastic soldiers and dolls were still, the shadows of the night retreating with the first whispers of dawn. The TV's static was gone, replaced by the soft light of the early morning sun filtering through the curtains. Granny shuffled into the room, her eyes crinkling with concern when she saw the blood. "You okay, Timmy?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. He nodded, not quite ready to explain the night's events. She didn't press the issue, instead heading to the kitchen to start breakfast. The smell of bacon and eggs filled the air, chasing away the last remnants of the night's terror. Timmy sat at the kitchen table, the doll now propped up in the chair beside him, watching as Granny moved with a surprising agility for her age. They ate in silence, the only sound the clink of silverware on plates and the occasional crackle of the bacon. Timmy felt the tension in the house start to ease with each bite, the night's events slowly fading into the background. His mother arrived shortly after, her eyes red from a night of worry. She scooped him into her arms, her embrace warm and reassuring. He told her about his nightmare, leaving out the part about the record and the doll. She held him tight, whispering soothing words into his ear. As they drove away from Granny's house, Timmy couldn't help but look back, the doll's empty eyes seeming to watch him from the window. He knew he'd never forget that night, the way the house had come alive with his fears. Years later, when Granny passed away in 2011, Timmy found himself revisiting that night. The house had been sold, its secrets packed away with the furniture and dusty knickknacks. But the memory remained, a strange tapestry of fear and courage that he carried with him into adulthood. Now a young man, Timmy often thought back to that night as he lay in his own bed, the whispers of his past echoing through the quiet of his apartment. He wondered if the house had ever truly been haunted, or if it had just been his own mind playing tricks on him. But one thing was certain, that night had changed him, and had shown him that sometimes, the monsters we fear the most are the ones we create ourselves.